I want to talk about the promotion leaflet that you have for your hotel breaks. And in it you give some quotes, reads a bit like your comments on Trivago or booking.com. Staff, excellent food, excellent feel equal going on holidays with everyone else. I no longer feel like people with disabilities are put in a box. It's excellent, it gives us a great holiday, not just respite. It's all, those quotes are also in your presentation, as you'll be aware. And the reason I read them out is because I think there's a fierce imbalance here about the representation of what people with disabilities may or may not choose and what may or may not be open to them. Because like everybody else here, and I assume you're the same, your organisation's the same, we've been heavily lobbied by the people who do use the centre regularly for their holidays. And I've got some quotes here that would actually break your heart, and I just want to read some of them into the record, because I think it's only fair to have people praise Cuisle in the same way as your brochure praises the hotels. This is from the sister of a 37-year-old woman. My sister is very vulnerable. She cannot talk or walk. We call Cuisle her boozing holiday because she can drive herself to the bar where they know her and they know what she likes. One man goes to visit her every year that she's there and has even written a song about her. How special is that? This is a young woman herself being quoted. Cuisle offers myself and my friends from my centre a holiday together where we look forward to seeing each other so much. It's the only opportunity we can have a holiday together. We have a great time meeting with other wheelchair users. And this one is from the father of a young teenage girl. He's actually a friend of mine. My daughter won't stay in anyone's house except my mother's because she knows Granny will look after her in the same way that the staff in Cuisle look after her. The idea of throwing her into a new surrounding because of some notion of integration is nonsense. She needs to feel safe and secure, and that only happens when she has continuity. Forcing people into isolation when they don't want to go somewhere else, they will have more anxiety and it will deter their families from sending them on holidays. When people suffer mental and physical disabilities, it's all about safety, security and knowing what to expect. Now I read that out because I think it's important to put a balance on it, because what strikes me as kind of really strange is that when you're asked for the numbers about what the users say, the numbers of people who want to use Cuisle and the numbers who don't, you don't have exact numbers. You have a general pattern of what may be happening in terms of your service users. But in the journal.ie and in your statement today, the Irish Wheelchair Association, and I quote, stressed to Minister McGrath that the clear choice and preference of people with a disability is increasingly more about having access to positive and non-segregated settings, and where existing commercial hotel provider settings implement universal design initiatives to accommodate people of all levels of abilities. I think that's a big statement to make without a questionnaire or a survey that we can all look at and say, well, there's 99 users that would prefer to be in Cuisle and there's 299 that would prefer to go into commercial hotels. I really do think it's a big statement to make. And the point I want to get to is, if that is the statement, that you made it very clear to Minister McGrath that this is what you believe is the pattern, based on what we don't know is the actual results, then your representations to Minister McGrath were preferencing the hotel model over the Cuisle model. And it may well be the case that had you done it the other way around, Minister McGrath might have said, let's go and find that 1.5 million. I'm not a big fan of any of the government ministers, but as it happens, he may well have done it. Where I do agree with you and where I do see you have a problem, this is a bigger political issue. And remember, this is in the same week that the government announced they're putting 3 billion of taxpayers' money into broadband. We've just had a big announcement about the overspend on the Children's Hospital, which, although we cannot prove it, most of us believe is impacting on all of the services, including mental health and disability. So when you say in your submission, in June of this year, the committee was briefed by a number of disability service providers on the growing funding crisis in the disability sector. That is a hugely important statement. And in that context, you say from 2008 to 2018, the Irish Wheelchair Association has seen its financial reserves diminish by 5.7 million. Now, in 2008, we had a banking collapse and we had a government that bailed out the bank to the tune of 64 billion and loads of things suffered. We now live in the fastest healthiest growing economy in the European Union. So in the context that this is happening to the most vulnerable sectors of society, and you're telling us as evidence that your funding is depleted, that there's a crisis in the funding of the disability sector, this is an absolute disgrace that Cuisle is closing. And all I can say to you is, anybody who was on the protest last week would 1000% back the users to retain that service. And we have to find a way to retain it. Given that we do have a government who make a bags of everything else, overspend on everything and deprive these people of proper funding, then we're going to have to find a firefighting service way out of it. Because we can't let them down. We can't let the father of that girl, the sister of that woman, and all of the people who are here today and their families, we cannot let them down. And whatever proposals the Senator is coming up with may be the way out. But it seems to me that you should probably go back to Minister McGrath and say the emphasis we put on the hotel model was outweighed and has been outweighed since by the protest and the sentiment that is coming very strongly from the people who use Cuisle day by day, year by year, and that we can't afford to close it, that people have to have the choice and the preference, and that we unfortunately gave you, Minister McGrath, the impression that there's a growing and only one way to go, which is into the commercialised hotels. I think that evidence you gave to Minister McGrath was flawed. If it wasn't flawed, we need to see what the wheelchair users and the people who use the service are actually saying to you about the service. We need to see that. And I'd like you to comment on that, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
Smith, thank you.
Yeah, there's a number of points, I suppose, there, Brid, that you raise. I go back to the fact that the decision for Cuisle was made because government were not able to provide funding.
That's not what you asked government.
Excuse me?
That doesn't seem to be what you asked government.
So if I go back 2 years, when we had our first engagement with Minister McGrath and with the HSE, our ask at that point was to secure funding so that Cuisle could remain the fantastic, wonderful facility that it is, that you've expressed very well today in the comments from the people who go there. We value that centre. So all of our dialogue for 2 years was around securing that funding. I met with Minister McGrath last week after it had become clear through the HSE that that funding would not be available. Minister McGrath invited us in to talk to him about how the new holiday model will work. So that was a different period of time and a different conversation. Our initial conversations for 2 years were entirely focused around securing the funding.
Well, what you're saying to me is that for 2 years you had one type of dialogue, which is we need the money to save Cuisle. And then in the last month you did a different type of dialogue, which is this hotel model will work, it's going to be great, it'll be integrated and it'll help people develop. The evidence is not there that you take people out of a setting where they meet their friends and they're used to them, their staff who are marvellous and know them and know exactly what they drink and know what they're saying when nobody else can particularly understand them. The evidence is not there that what you put to Minister McGrath last week actually holds water. I really don't believe that that's the case, and I think that all of us here need to seek a meeting with Minister McGrath and to help to get that decision reversed. And I think we have political weight on our side. They cannot in 1 week give $3 billion to the National Broadband Plan and then say there isn't $1.5 million to look after that centre. That is an outrageous condemnation of any measure of what is a decent society.
And I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, Brid. I'm one of the people who lobbied this committee back in June with regard to the crisis and disability funding. It's something that IWA does day in, day out, all of the time. We did not want to leave Cuisle. That was not what we wanted to do. We've invested a lot of IWA's own money over the last number of years to ensure that we can stay there. Without doing the works, we cannot stay there. And it's a huge, sad day for everybody who goes to Cuisle, for the staff in Cuisle, for all of IWA's management and board. But in the absence of getting those works done, we cannot continue to use the building. Well,
I'll put it to you, Rosemary, since we're in first name terms, that I think from your report and what is in the media and what is in quotes from the IWA, that you did not fight hard enough for these users. You haven't fought hard enough for them. You say you're not you're only servicing the board, but you are the CEO. Your remuneration reflects your responsibilities, and your responsibility is not just to your board, it is to these people. And I don't believe you fought hard enough for them. I'm not saying that you've sat in your hands for the last 2 years, but your statements in the last number of weeks are really letting these people down. And I think we need to reverse back quickly and go back to the Minister and say this cannot close. They have to find the money. There's money out there. They put 17 million in protecting Donald Trump when he visited. There is money there. And we have to make sure that we fight for it.
Thank you, Deputy Smith.
I suppose in response to that, I would say to you that I spend a significant amount of time advocating and lobbying government on behalf of people with disabilities. We've done a huge amount of work on this over the last 2 years. If that wasn't enough, then I'm sorry if it wasn't enough, but we certainly felt that we did everything we could over that period of time. I do want to draw attention to your comment with regard to everything that has been in the media over the last number of weeks. Irish Wheelchair Association has had a very small number of media inquiries with regard to the decision around Cuisle. And when we read the media and listen to the media and the volume of misinformation that has been put out into public dialogue by the media, it raises questions about the media themselves and how they conduct themselves, because they have not dealt or contacted IWA directly.
Well, I only quoted the journal.ie, and the quote I gave is
no, I know
also
you
in your
did. Yeah, no, I'm not having a go with you.
I'm not
making
going broader
a comment.
than that.
No, I know
I'm
that.
using it as evidence that I
Sure.
believe you conceded way too much to the Minister, and that you did that on behalf of your users, and that was the wrong thing to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, finally, Deputy Fitzmaurice, thank you.